The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot, freezing everyone in the ultra-luxury lounge of the Bombardier Global 7500. Tiffany, the head flight attendant, stood with her hand raised, her chest heaving with indignation. In front of her sat a woman in a faded hoodie, clutching her cheek, eyes burning not with tears, but with a terrifying, silent fire. Tiffany thought she was disciplining a stowaway, a nobody who had sneaked into first class. She didn't know she had just assaulted Naomi Price, the billionaire owner of the very airline she worked for. And that slap? It was about to cost Tiffany a lot more than just her job. The tarmac at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey was slick with rain, reflecting the flashing lights of the fuel trucks and the sleek, predatory silhouette of the private jets lined up like steel sharks. Among them sat the jewel of the fleet, a Bombardier Global 7500, painted in a custom matte midnight blue. It belonged to Apex Aviation, a company known for catering to the top 1% of the 1%. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of expensive leather and fresh orchids. Tiffany St. Clair adjusted her silk scarf, checking her reflection in the galley mirror. She was the lead cabin attendant for Apex, a position she wore like a crown. She was beautiful, blonde, and severely polished, but her eyes held a cold sharpness that unnerved the junior staff. "Everything needs to be perfect, Brittany," Tiffany snapped at the younger attendant, who was nervously arranging the champagne flutes. "We have a VIP list today. Senator Reynolds might be on board, or maybe someone from the tech sector. I don't want a single smudge on this crystal." "Yes, Tiffany," Brittany squeaked, wiping a glass that was already spotless. Tiffany smoothed her skirt. She loved this job, not for the service, but for the power. In the air, inside this metal tube, she was the queen. She decided who got the extra caviar and who waited 10 minutes for a refill. She prided herself on being able to spot money. She knew the difference between a bespoke Brioni suit and an off-the-rack imposter. She could smell old money versus new money, and she absolutely hated no money. The boarding stairs lowered, and the captain, Richard Hayes, poked his head out of the cockpit. He was a silver fox, a former Air Force pilot who had flown for Apex for 10 years. "Tiffany," Captain Hayes said, his voice gravelly. "Manifest update. We have a last-minute add-on. A deadhead passenger. Corporate sent a memo saying an employee needs a lift to London for a transfer. Name is N. Price." Tiffany rolled her eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. "A deadhead? Seriously, Richard? On a charter this expensive? Where am I supposed to put them? The jump seat is broken." "Put them in the rear lounge. It's empty. The client cancelled the entourage, so it's just the main VIP in the forward cabin later. Just get them seated and keep them out of the way." "Fine," Tiffany muttered, as Hayes went back to his checks. "I hate it when corporate uses our jets as a bus service." 10 minutes later, footsteps echoed on the metal stairs. Tiffany put on her plastic smile, ready to greet a senator or a CEO. Instead, a woman walked in. She was black, tall, and dressed in attire that made Tiffany's lip curl instantly. She wore a grey, oversized hoodie that looked like it had been washed 100 times, black leggings, and battered sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she carried a worn-out canvas duffel bag. She looked exhausted, like she had just worked a double shift at a diner. This was Naomi Price. Naomi paused at the entrance, taking in the cabin. She didn't look impressed by the gold-plated fixtures or the cream leather seats. She looked at them critically, as if checking for dust. "Welcome to Apex," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. She blocked the aisle, not moving to let Naomi pass. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Naomi blinked, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. I was told just to show my ID. I'm the transfer. Price. Tiffany snatched the paper with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. She glanced at it, then back at Naomi, scanning her up and down. No jewelry, no makeup. The bag looked cheap. Garbage, Tiffany thought. Absolute garbage. Right, the deadhead, Tiffany said, dropping the professional facade instantly. Her voice became flat and commanding. Listen, let's get one thing straight. This is a $100 million aircraft, not a Greyhound bus. You are here on a favor. Naomi raised an eyebrow. I'm aware of what kind of plane this is. Good, Tiffany said, stepping closer, invading Naomi's personal space. That means you don't touch anything you don't have to. You don't speak to the paying clients. You don't ask for champagne. You go to the back, you sit down, and you stay quiet until we land in London. Do you understand? Naomi stared at her. There was a calmness in Naomi's eyes that Tiffany found irritating. Usually, when she bullied the junior staff or non-revenue passengers, they looked down. They got scared. This woman just looked bored. I understand, Naomi said quietly. Is the rear cabin open? It is for now, Tiffany said, pointing a manicured finger toward the back. Go, and stash that ugly bag somewhere out of sight. It ruins the aesthetic. Naomi shifted the bag on her shoulder. She wanted to say something. She wanted to tell this woman that she had personally approved the interior design of this jet 3 months ago. She wanted to say that the ugly bag contained contracts worth more than Tiffany would earn in 10 lifetimes. But Naomi was tired. She had just come from a grueling 3-day negotiation in New York, where she had acquired a logistics firm, and she simply wanted to sleep. She didn't have the energy to fire someone right now. Sure, Naomi said, brushing past Tiffany. As she passed, her duffel bag accidentally bumped against Tiffany's hip. It was a gentle graze, nothing more. Tiffany gasped, as if she'd been stabbed. Watch it, she screeched. She dusted off her uniform skirt aggressively. Clumsy oaf. If you scratched this fabric, I'm reporting you to HR. Naomi stopped and turned back. It's polyester blend, Tiffany. It doesn't scratch that easily. And you might want to check the stitching on your hem. It's coming loose. Before Tiffany could respond, Naomi disappeared into the rear cabin and slid the privacy divider shut. Tiffany stood there, mouth agape, her face turning a blotchy red. Brittany, who had watched the whole thing from the galley, looked terrified. Did she just critique your uniform? Brittany whispered. She's dead, Tiffany hissed, her hands balling into fists. Nobody talks to me like that on my plane. I don't care who she is in the company. She's going to regret stepping foot on this flight. The flight took off smoothly, piercing through the cloud layer and leveling out at 45,000 feet. The cabin was quiet. The expected VIP client had cancelled at the last minute, meaning the plane was flying empty, save for the crew and Naomi. This should have been a relaxing flight for the crew, a ghost leg. But Tiffany couldn't relax. She was stewing. She sat in the galley, scrolling through her phone, complaining to her boyfriend via text about the ghetto trash corporate had forced onto her flight. Brittany, Tiffany barked. Go check on the back. Make sure she hasn't stolen the silverware. Brittany nodded and scurried off. She returned a moment later. She's just reading, Tiffany. She asked for a glass of water. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. Water? Did you give it to her? I was about to. No, Tiffany said, standing up. A malicious smile played on her lips. I'll handle it. She wants service? I'll give her service. Tiffany went to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. It was lukewarm, the one they kept for the coffee machine, not the chilled Voss water reserved for guests. She didn't pour it into a crystal glass. Instead, she grabbed a flimsy paper cup usually reserved for the pilot's quick espressos. She marched to the rear cabin. Naomi was reclined in one of the leather seats, reading a file marked Confidential. Merger Acquisition. She had her shoes off, her feet resting on the ottoman. Tiffany slid the door open with a bang. Naomi didn't jump. She just looked up slowly. "Water," Tiffany said, slamming the paper cup down on the side table. The water sloshed over the rim, splashing onto Naomi's file. Naomi pulled the papers away quickly, dabbing at the wet spot. "You spilled it on the documents. Maybe if you weren't sprawled out like you owned the place, there would be room for a cup," Tiffany sneered. "And put your shoes back on. This is a sanitary environment, not your living room." Naomi sighed, closing the file. She looked at Tiffany with a mix of pity and annoyance. "What is your problem, Tiffany? I haven't done anything to you." "Your existence here is the problem," Tiffany spat. "You think because you work for the company you're on my level? I serve royalty. I serve billionaires. I don't serve support staff who look like they dumpster dive for clothes." Naomi stood up. She was taller than Tiffany, and despite the hoodie, she held herself with a posture that radiated authority. "You serve whoever is on this plane. That is your job, and judging by your attitude, you're not very good at it." Tiffany laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Excuse me? I am the best. I run this cabin, and I can make your life miserable. In fact, I think I'll write a report to HR stating you were insubordinate and aggressive. Who do you think they'll believe? The lead flight attendant with 5 years of service, or the scrub transfer?" "I think," Naomi said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm, "that they will believe the facts." "Facts?" Tiffany stepped closer, her face inches from Naomi's. "Here's a fact. You don't belong here. You're dirtying my cabin." Naomi looked at the name tag on Tiffany's chest. "St. Clair? Is that French, or just something you picked to sound sophisticated?" Tiffany's face went purple. "You listen to me, you little—" "No, you listen," Naomi interrupted, her tone sharp. "I've been watching you. You treat your junior stewardess like a slave. You treat this aircraft like it's your personal kingdom. You forgot the golden rule of service. Respect. You don't know who I am." "I know exactly what you are," Tiffany yelled, losing all control. "You're a broke, affirmative action hire getting a free ride." Naomi didn't flinch at the racism. She had heard it before, from people much more powerful than a flight attendant. She simply reached for her phone on the table. "I'm going to record this interaction." That was the trigger. Tiffany saw the phone and panicked. She couldn't have a video of her screaming at a passenger, even a non-revenue one. Instinct took over, a violent, entitled instinct. Tiffany's hand lashed out. Thwack! The sound was sickeningly loud in the pressurized cabin. Tiffany's palm connected hard with Naomi's cheek. The force of the blow knocked the phone out of Naomi's hand, sending it skittering across the floor. Naomi's head snapped to the side. Silence descended instantly. The hum of the engines seemed to vanish. Naomi stood frozen, her hand slowly coming up to touch her stinging cheek. She could taste a metallic tang of blood where her tooth had cut her inner lip. Tiffany stood panting, her hand stinging, her eyes wide. She realized what she had done, but her ego wouldn't let her back down. She doubled down. "You threatened me," Tiffany stammered, her voice shaking. "You were going to hit me with the phone. I acted in self-defense." Naomi slowly turned her head, back to face Tiffany. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by something much colder. Ice. Absolute zero. "Self-defense," Naomi repeated, testing the word. "Yes," Tiffany shrieked. "Brittany," she yelled toward the front. "Brittany, get back here! This passenger just attacked me!" Brittany came running in, eyes wide with horror. She saw Naomi holding her cheek, the red handprint already blooming on her dark skin. She saw Tiffany, flushed and manic. "Call the captain," Tiffany ordered Brittany. "Tell him we have an unruly passenger. Tell him to radio ahead for police at Heathrow. I want this woman arrested the second we touch down." Brittany looked at Naomi, then at Tiffany. "But—" "Tiffany, she—" "Do it!" Tiffany screamed. Brittany turned and ran toward the cockpit. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't attack. She simply bent down, picked up her phone, and checked the screen. It was cracked. "You made a mistake, Tiffany," Naomi said softly. "The only mistake was letting you on board," Tiffany hissed, retreating to the door. "You're going to jail." Naomi sat back down. She didn't look at Tiffany. She opened her file again, though her hands were trembling slightly from the adrenaline. She waited. Moments later, the plane banked slightly. The intercom clicked on. "Ladies." "Well, passenger." Captain Hayes's voice came over the speaker, sounding confused and tense. "This is the captain. We've had a report of a disturbance. I need everyone to remain seated with seatbelts fastened. We are contacting ground control." Tiffany smirked from the doorway. "Hear that? That's the sound of your life ending." Naomi looked out the window at the dark Atlantic Ocean below. She pulled a second phone from her pocket, a satellite phone that bypassed the plane's Wi-Fi. She dialed a number. "Hello?" a male voice answered on the first ring. It was David Sterling, the CEO of the Apex Aviation Holding Group. "David," Naomi said, her voice steady. "It's Naomi. I need you to meet me at Heathrow, and bring the legal team, all of them." "Naomi, is everything okay? You sound—" "I've just been assaulted on my own plane, David, by my staff. I want the police there, but not for me." She hung up and looked at Tiffany, who was now busy locking the liquor cabinet as if Naomi were a thief. Enjoy the flight, Naomi thought. It's the last one you'll ever take. For the next 4 hours, the Bombardier Global 7500 became a prison cell made of gold and leather. The atmosphere inside the pressurized tube was toxic, thick with unspoken threats and the heavy weight of impending doom. Tiffany St. Clair had retreated to the forward galley, but she didn't act like a woman who had just been assaulted. She acted like a victor. She sat on the crew jump seat, her legs crossed, sipping a glass of the client's vintage Dom Perignon, a strictly prohibited act for crew members. But Tiffany no longer cared about the rules. She felt invincible. In her mind, she had spun the narrative perfectly. She was the victim of a deranged, lower-class stowaway. The company would have to back her. They always backed the crew over deadheads. She watched Brittany, the junior flight attendant, pacing nervously in the narrow corridor. Brittany looked pale, her hands trembling as she tidied up the already immaculate workspace. "Stop pacing. You're making me dizzy," Tiffany snapped, taking a sip of the champagne. "And fix your scarf. You look like a mess." Brittany stopped and looked at Tiffany with wide, watery eyes. "Tiffany, I'm scared. That woman, she's bleeding. Her lip is cut, and the mark on her face. It's getting darker. We should give her some ice. We should check on her." "We will do no such thing," Tiffany hissed, setting the crystal flute down with a dangerous clink. "She is a threat. You don't aid and abet a threat. If you go back there, Brittany, I will assume you're on her side. And you know what happens to people who go against me, don't you? Remember Sarah? Remember how she suddenly lost her schedule and had to quit?" Brittany swallowed hard, the memory of their former colleague serving as a potent silencer. "I remember." "Good. Then stick to the story. She got aggressive. She lunged at me with a heavy object, and I pushed her back in self-defense. That's it. That's the truth." "But she didn't—" "That is the truth." Tiffany's voice rose to a shriek, her eyes bulging. "If you say anything else, Brittany, I will make sure you never fly again. I'll make sure you can't even get a job scanning tickets at a bus station. Do you understand?" Brittany nodded, defeated. "Yes, Tiffany." Meanwhile, in the rear cabin, Naomi Price sat in absolute stillness. She hadn't moved from her seat. She hadn't wiped the dried blood from the corner of her mouth. She wanted it there. It was evidence. She looked out the window at the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the sky shifting from the bright blue of midday to the bruised purple of dusk as they raced toward Europe. Her cheek throbbed with a dull, hot ache. It had been years since anyone had laid a hand on her. She had grown up in the rough neighborhoods of Chicago, fighting for every inch of respect she got. She had clawed her way through community college, then business school, working double shifts as a waitress, ironically, much like the job Tiffany looked down on. Naomi had built Apex Logistics from a single delivery van into a global empire, and then acquired Apex Aviation as a crown jewel. She dealt with hostile takeovers, corrupt politicians, and ruthless competitors daily. But being slapped by a flight attendant on her own jet? That was a new level of absurdity. Naomi wasn't sad. She wasn't even angry anymore. She was in execution mode. She was mentally drafting the legal filings, the press releases, and the termination letters. The door to the rear cabin slid open. It was Captain Hayes. He didn't enter fully. He stood in the doorway, his posture rigid and defensive. He looked at Naomi with a mixture of suspicion and distaste. He saw the hoodie, the messy hair, and now the blood, and his bias filled in the blanks. He saw a problem passenger, not a victim. "Ms. Price," Hayes said, his voice stern. "I've radioed Heathrow. Police will be meeting the aircraft at the gate. I need you to surrender your passport to me immediately." Naomi turned her head slowly. She didn't reach for her bag. "I don't think so, Captain." Hayes stepped forward, his face reddening. "This isn't a request. You are disrupting a federal flight. Surrender your passport." "I am sitting quietly in my seat, Captain," Naomi said, her voice ice-cold. "I haven't moved. I haven't spoken. The only disruption on this flight is your lead attendant who physically assaulted a passenger. I suggest you check the cabin security cameras before you make any more demands." Hayes scoffed. "The cameras in the rear lounge have been malfunctioning for weeks. Tiffany logged the maintenance request herself, so it's your word against hers. And I've known Tiffany for 5 years. She's a professional. You're a freeloader." Naomi almost smiled. Of course Tiffany had disabled the cameras, or claimed they were disabled. It was a predator's tactic. "Keep my passport," Naomi said. "No, I'll hand it to the British authorities. And as for your assessment of my character, Captain Hayes, I suggest you enjoy commanding this aircraft while you can. It's a beautiful machine. It's a shame you won't be flying it after today." "Is that a threat?" Hayes demanded, stepping closer. "Are you threatening a pilot?" "It's a prediction," Naomi said, turning back to the window. "Please leave me alone. I have work to do." Hayes stood there for a moment, fuming, his authority bouncing off her like water off a duck's back. He wanted to drag her out of the seat, but something in her demeanor, that absolute, unshakable confidence, made him hesitate. He grunted, turned on his heel, and slammed the door shut. Naomi picked up her satellite phone again. She saw a message from David Sterling. "We are at the tarmac. Operations team is with me. Director of HR is on the line. What is your status?" Naomi typed back. "Status: hostage, physical injury. Crew is hostile. Captain is complicit. Let the police board first. I want them to hang themselves with their own rope." She put the phone away and closed her eyes. The pain in her face was a sharp reminder of why she was doing this. It wasn't just for her. It was for every person who had ever been looked down on, judged by their clothes, or mistreated by someone with a tiny ounce of power. Tiffany St. Clair represented everything Naomi despised: arrogance without merit. The plane began its descent. The engines whined as the throttle reduced. The cabin tilted. In the galley, Tiffany reapplied her lipstick. She checked her reflection. She looked flawless. She practiced her sad face in the mirror, furrowing her brows, widening her eyes to look vulnerable. "Almost there," she whispered to herself. "Goodbye, trash." She didn't know it yet, but the ground she was rushing toward was about to open up and swallow her whole. The landing at Heathrow Airport was technically perfect. Captain Hayes greased the wheels onto the runway so smoothly that the transition from air to ground was barely perceptible. But inside the cabin, the tension was so high it felt like the fuselage was vibrating. Outside, the London weather was dismal, a grey, weeping drizzle that slicked the tarmac and blurred the runway lights. As the Bombardier Global 7500 taxied toward the private terminal, Tiffany St. Clair peered out of the porthole window. Usually, a private arrival meant a single luxury black car waiting on the tarmac to whisk the VIP away without them ever having to step foot inside a terminal. Today, however, the scene was different. "Look at that," Tiffany said to Brittany, a smug grin spreading across her face. "Richard really called it in. Look at all those lights." There were 3 police cruisers waiting, their blue lights flashing rhythmically against the wet pavement. But behind them was a convoy that Tiffany didn't quite understand. 3 massive black Range Rovers with tinted windows were parked in a phalanx formation. Standing beside them were men in dark suits holding umbrellas. "Who are they?" Brittany asked, her voice trembling. "Probably immigration enforcement," Tiffany dismissed, waving a hand. "Or maybe specialized security. They take air rage incidents very seriously these days, especially post 9/11. That woman is going to be in a holding cell within the hour." The plane came to a halt. The engines whined down into silence. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. "Stay here," Tiffany ordered Brittany. "I will handle the authorities. You just nod if they ask you anything. Don't speak unless spoken to." Tiffany smoothed her uniform, took a deep breath, and walked to the main cabin door. She opened it, and the cool, damp English air rushed in. The automated stairs lowered with a mechanical hum. 2 uniformed officers from the Metropolitan Police walked up the stairs first. One was a tall, imposing sergeant named Graves. The other was a younger constable. "Good evening, officers," Tiffany said, her voice trembling with a perfectly manufactured fragility. She held a hand to her chest. "Thank God you're here. It's been a terrifying flight." Sergeant Graves looked at her. "You are the lead cabin attendant?" "Yes," Tiffany said, sniffing audibly. "Tiffany St. Clair, the passenger. She's in the rear cabin. We had to barricade her in. She became violent. She attacked me." Tiffany pointed to her own flawless face, then to her pristine uniform. "She tried to hit me with a metal object. I'm shaken." "Is she armed?" Graves asked, his hand resting near his belt. "I don't know," Tiffany lied. "She has a large bag she refused to let us check. She could have anything in there." Captain Hayes emerged from the cockpit, buttoning his jacket. "Officer, Captain Richard Hayes. I can corroborate Ms. St. Clair's story. The passenger was insubordinate and aggressive from the moment she boarded. A real danger to the safety of this flight." Graves nodded. "Right. Stay here. Constable, with me." The police moved past Tiffany and Hayes, heading toward the rear of the plane. Tiffany followed them, eager to watch the humiliation. She wanted to see the handcuffs. She wanted to see Naomi dragged out. They reached the rear sliding door. Graves opened it. Naomi was standing now. She had put her shoes back on. She held her duffel bag in one hand. The red handprint on her face had turned into a nasty bruise, swelling the left side of her jaw. Her lip was swollen and cut. "Step out with your hands visible, ma'am," Sergeant Graves commanded. Naomi stepped into the aisle. She didn't raise her hands in surrender. She held them out calmly. "I am the victim here, officer. I was assaulted by that woman." She pointed a steady finger at Tiffany. "Liar!" Tiffany shrieked from behind the police. "She's lying. Look at her. Look at how she's dressed. She's a vagrant." "Quiet!" Graves barked at Tiffany. He looked at Naomi. He saw the injury. It was undeniable. "Ma'am, you have visible injuries." "Yes," Naomi said calmly. "Caused by Ms. St. Clair approximately 4 hours ago over the Atlantic. I have documented the incident." "She hit herself," Tiffany yelled, sounding increasingly desperate. "She's crazy. She did it to frame me." Suddenly, there was a commotion at the front of the plane. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Make way! Move!" a deep voice bellowed. Tiffany turned around, annoyed that someone was interrupting her moment. "Excuse me, this is a police matter. You can't—" Her voice died in her throat. A man in a sharp, bespoke Italian suit stormed into the cabin. He was soaked from the rain, having run from the cars without waiting for an umbrella. He was an older man, distinguished, with silver hair and eyes that burned with fury. It was David Sterling. Tiffany froze. She knew David Sterling. He was the CEO of the Apex Aviation Holding Group. He was the man who signed the paychecks of the people who signed her paychecks. She had only seen him once before, at a company gala, from a distance. "He's here," Tiffany thought, her heart soaring. "He's here to protect the company's reputation. He's here to make sure this trash doesn't sue us." "Mr. Sterling," Tiffany gasped, stepping forward. "Oh, thank goodness. This woman, she's trying to ruin us. She's—" David Sterling didn't even look at her. He shoulder-checked her, hard, knocking her back into the galley counter as he rushed past the police officers. "Naomi!" David shouted. He reached the rear cabin and stopped, staring at Naomi's face. When he saw the bruise, his face went pale, then red with rage. "My God," David whispered. "Are you all right?" Tiffany blinked. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Naomi, why is he calling the deadhead by her first name?" "I'm fine, David," Naomi said, her voice remaining steady, though her legs felt weak now that help had arrived. "But I want these officers to take a statement immediately, and I want the flight voice recorder pulled before it's erased." "Done," David said. He turned to the police officers. "Sergeant, I am David Sterling, CEO of Apex Aviation. This woman is Naomi Price." Sergeant Graves looked confused. "Okay. And who is Naomi Price?" David turned slowly to look at Tiffany, who was trembling by the galley. He looked at Captain Hayes, who had gone dead white. "Naomi Price," David announced, his voice booming through the small cabin, "is the owner of Apex Aviation. She bought the company 3 months ago. She owns this plane. She owns the fuel in the wings. She owns the uniform on that flight attendant's back." The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines had ever been. Tiffany felt her knees give way. She grabbed the counter for support. "Owner," she whispered, the word tasting like ash. "She's the owner?" Captain Hayes stammered. "But the manifest, it said deadhead. Transfer. I wanted to see how my employees operate when they think no one is watching," Naomi said, stepping past the police to stand in front of Tiffany. Naomi towered over the flight attendant. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that the air felt thin. Naomi didn't look like a tired traveler anymore. Even in her hoodie, she looked like a titan. "And now I know," Naomi said softly. "Miss Price, Tiffany stammered, tears of genuine terror finally spilling over. "I didn't know. You have to understand. You thought I was nobody," Naomi finished for her. "You thought because of the color of my skin and the clothes I wore, I was beneath you. You thought you could treat me like an animal and get away with it." Naomi leaned in close, so only Tiffany could hear the next words. "You played a game, Tiffany, and you just lost everything." Naomi turned to Sergeant Graves. "Officer, I would like to press charges for assault and battery against Tiffany St. Clair, and I would like Captain Hayes detained for falsifying federal flight records and aiding in the cover-up." "Wait!" Hayes shouted. "I didn't do anything. I just sat in the cockpit." "You left me in a locked cabin with my attacker after I requested help," Naomi said. "That is negligence, and lying to the police just now. That's obstruction." David Sterling pulled out his phone. "Our legal team is outside. They will handle the specifics with the precinct." "No!" Tiffany screamed as the constable moved toward her, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You can't do this! I'm the lead attendant. I run this plane." "Not anymore," David said coldly. "You're fired, effective immediately, and you're banned from all Apex flights. Forever." The metallic click of the handcuffs locking around Tiffany's wrists was the sweetest sound Naomi had ever heard. "Get her off my plane," Naomi said, turning her back on them, as the police dragged a sobbing, screaming Tiffany St. Clair down the stairs and into the rain. Naomi finally allowed herself to sit down. The adrenaline was fading, and the exhaustion was crashing in. But it wasn't over yet. The legal battle was just starting, and Naomi Price was about to show the world exactly what happens when you wake a sleeping giant, the transition from the plush, temperature-controlled environment of a $50 million private jet to the holding cell at the Heathrow police station was a shock to the system that Tiffany St. Clair's brain simply refused to process. She sat on a hard wooden bench bolted to the floor. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale sweat. They had taken her uniform scarf, her belt, and her high heels. Standard procedure to prevent self-harm, she was told, but it felt like a deliberate stripping of her dignity. She sat in her stocking feet on the cold concrete, shivering. "This is a mistake," she muttered to the damp walls. "I am a U.S. citizen. I have rights. They can't keep me here." The heavy metal door clanked open. Detective Inspector Graham, a stern woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, walked in carrying a clipboard and a plastic cup of lukewarm tea. She set the tea down on the metal table. "Drink," Graham said. "You look like you're going into shock." "I want my lawyer," Tiffany snapped, finding a shred of her old arrogance. "And I want to call the U.S. Embassy. You are holding me illegally based on the word of a crazy woman." Graham sat down slowly, clicking a pen. "That crazy woman has already given a sworn statement, Ms. St. Clair, as has the CEO of your company, Mr. David Sterling. And unfortunately for you, the airport medical examiner has just finished photographing Ms. Price's injuries. A split lip requiring 2 stitches and significant bruising to the zygomatic arch. That's consistent with a high-impact strike." "She came at me," Tiffany lied, her voice rising in pitch. "I pushed her away. She must have fallen." Graham sighed, flipping a page on her clipboard. "See, that's where your story falls apart. We pulled the cockpit voice recorder. You know, the CVR. It records audio from the flight deck, but on the Global 7500, the ambient mics pick up loud noises in the forward galley if the door is open. We heard the slap, Tiffany. It was loud, and we heard you screaming racial slurs immediately afterward. We have you on tape calling her a affirmative action hire." Tiffany's blood ran cold. She had forgotten about the acoustics. "I was stressed. It was a stressful flight." You're being charged with assault occasioning actual bodily harm, ABH, racially aggravated public disorder, and endangering the safety of an aircraft. Graham listed the charges casually. Bail is being opposed by the Crown Prosecution Service due to flight risk. You're going to be a guest of Her Majesty's prison system for a while. Prison? Tiffany whispered. Real prison? Holloway or Bronzefield, Graham said, standing up. You better get comfortable. And just so you know, the story has leaked. What story? Graham allowed herself a small, grim smile. A ground crew member filmed your arrest. It's trending on Twitter. The Billionaire slap. You're famous, Tiffany. Just not in the way you want it. Across London, in the penthouse suite of the Dorchester Hotel, the mood was somber but efficient. Naomi Price sat in a velvet armchair, holding an ice pack to her face. A private doctor was packing up his bag. Keep the ice on for 20 minutes at a time, the doctor instructed. The swelling will go down in a few days. The cut inside the mouth heals fast. Thank you, doctor, Naomi said. Her voice was muffled, but her mind was razor-sharp. David Sterling stood by the window, looking out at Hyde Park. He looked furious. He had been pacing for an hour, fielding calls from the board of directors. I'm firing the entire HR department, David growled. How did she slip through? How does a person like that get to be a lead attendant on our flagship jet? She was good at managing up, Naomi said, wincing as she shifted the ice pack. She kissed the ring of the powerful and kicked the people below her. It's a common corporate disease, David. I just happened to see the symptoms up close. I'm issuing a press release, David said. Full apology, taking full responsibility. We're launching an internal audit of all crew behavior. No, Naomi said, lowering the ice pack. Not yet. David turned, surprised. Why? We need to control the narrative. If we apologize now, it looks like damage control, Naomi said, her eyes darkening. I want her to speak first. I want to see what she says when she thinks she still has a chance. She's a narcissist, David. She won't plead guilty. She'll go to the press. She'll try to paint herself as the victim of a difficult passenger. Let her dig her own grave. Then, when she's standing on the edge, we push her in. David nodded slowly, understanding the strategy. You want to destroy her. I want to make an example of her, Naomi corrected. This isn't just about me. It's about every service worker, every nobody she's ever tormented. I have the resources to fight back. Most people don't. I'm fighting for them. Naomi's phone buzzed. It was a message from her chief of security. Miss Price, we've done a background dive on Tiffany St. Clair. You were right. This wasn't the first time. We found 3 former stewardesses who were fired for incompetence after clashing with Tiffany. And there's a lawsuit from 2022 that was settled out of court. A hotel maid she accused of theft. The maid was innocent, but lost her job anyway. Naomi showed the message to David. See? She's a predator. And predators don't stop until they hit a wall. You're the wall, David said. I'm the wrecking ball, Naomi replied. Back in the cell, Tiffany was using her one phone call. She didn't call her parents. They were working-class people in Ohio she was ashamed of. She called Chad, her investment banker boyfriend of 6 months. Chad was her ticket to the high life, the man she planned to marry to secure her status. Chad, she sobbed into the receiver. Chad, you have to help me. It's a nightmare. I'm in jail. There was a long pause on the other end. Yeah, Tiff, I know. Chad's voice was cold, distant. I saw the video. The video? It's out of context. She attacked me. You have to wire me bail money. You have to call your family's lawyer, the one who handled your DUI. Tiffany, Chad said, his voice flat. My firm has a morality clause. If I'm associated with a hate crime, and that's what they're calling it, I lose my bonus. I lose my clients." "Hate crime? I'm your girlfriend!" Tiffany shrieked. "Not anymore," Chad said. "Don't call this number again. The police have my statement that we are no longer together. Good luck." Click. Tiffany stared at the receiver, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a hornet. She dropped the phone, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor. For the first time in her life, her looks, her charm, and her lies weren't working. The reality was setting in, heavy and suffocating. She was alone. But even then, in the dark, a spark of delusion remained. "I can fix this," she thought. "I just need to tell my side. The media loves a pretty blonde girl in trouble. I'll go on TV. I'll cry. I'll make them believe me." She didn't know that Naomi was counting on exactly that. 3 days later, Tiffany St. Clair was released on bail. Her parents had mortgaged their small house in Ohio to pay the bond, a guilt trip Tiffany had executed masterfully over a 10-minute collect call. She didn't care about their retirement savings. She just needed to get out. She walked out of the London precinct wearing a borrowed tracksuit, shielding her face from the cameras. The flashbulbs were blinding. "Tiffany, did you slap her because she was black? Tiffany, how does it feel to assault a billionaire? Miss St. Clair, do you have a comment for Apex Aviation?" She ignored them, diving into a waiting taxi. She checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of London, far from the luxury she was used to. She immediately logged on to social media. It was a bloodbath. Her Instagram, once a curated shrine to her glamorous life of travel and champagne, was flooded with thousands of hate comments, snake emojis, clown faces, and demands for jail time filled every post. But she also found a small, dark corner of the internet supporting her. Trolls, racists, and contrarians were spinning a narrative that Naomi Price was an arrogant elite who had provoked a working-class woman. Tiffany latched onto this. She contacted a slimy British tabloid journalist named Piers McGowan, known for taking the anti-woke angle on every story. They met in a dim pub. McGowan smelled of tobacco and desperation. "I can get you an exclusive interview," McGowan said, leaning in. "Prime time. Tell your story. Say she was abusive. Say she threw the first punch. Say you were terrified for your safety. If you cry, the public will soften." "I can cry," Tiffany said, her eyes hard. "I can do whatever it takes." The interview aired 24 hours later. Tiffany sat in a modest blouse, wearing minimal makeup, looking fragile. She spun a tale of a tyrannical passenger who had verbally abused her for hours, threatened the crew, and finally lunged at her. "I didn't know who she was," Tiffany sobbed on camera, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. "I just saw a woman who was out of control. I was protecting my aircraft. And now the billionaire class is trying to crush me because I stood up to them." For a brief moment, the tide seemed to wobble. People love an underdog. Then, Naomi dropped the hammer. The next morning, Apex Aviation released a video on their official YouTube channel. It wasn't a corporate statement. It was the raw footage. Naomi had bluffed about the cameras being broken in the rear lounge. They were broken, but the audio from the hallway camera, the one Tiffany thought was off, was crystal clear. And more damningly, Brittany, the junior stewardess, had come forward. Brittany had recorded a deposition. The video played on every news station in the world. Clip, the sound of the slap. Thwack. Tiffany's voice. "You're a broke, affirmative action hire getting a free ride." Tiffany's voice. "Nobody talks to me like that on my plane." Tiffany's voice. "She's dead. Nobody talks to me like that." Then, Brittany appeared on screen, looking terrified, but resolute. "Tiffany told me to lie," Brittany said to the camera. "She said if I didn't back her up, she'd ruin my career like she did to Sarah." She took the water from the tap, not the bottle, just to disrespect Ms. Price. She wanted a fight. She enjoyed it. The interview with the tabloid journalist instantly aged like milk. Tiffany's victim narrative disintegrated in seconds. The public didn't just dislike her, they loathed her. She wasn't just a racist, she was a liar who had tried to manipulate the world's sympathy. The hard karma began to hit in waves. First, the legal charges were upgraded. The prosecutor added, "perverting the course of justice" to the list, a serious felony in the UK for lying to the police based on the new audio evidence. This carried a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, though usually resulted in several years. Second, the civil lawsuits began. Naomi Price sued Tiffany for defamation regarding the TV interview. The damages sought were in the millions. Tiffany didn't have millions. She didn't have thousands. Third, and most painfully for Tiffany, was the social erasure. She tried to go to a grocery store near her motel. She was wearing sunglasses and a hat. As she reached for a carton of milk, a woman next to her gasped. "It's her!" the woman said loudly. "It's the slapper!" People turned. Phones came out. They started filming her. "Get out of here!" someone shouted. "Racist trash!" Tiffany dropped the milk. It exploded on the floor, white liquid pooling around her cheap sneakers, and ran. She ran out of the store, sobbing, chased by the jeers of strangers. Back at the motel, the manager was waiting at her door. "You have to leave," he said, arms crossed. "Other guests are complaining. We don't want trouble here." "I have nowhere to go," Tiffany screamed. "Not my problem," the manager said. "Get out." She sat on the curb with her suitcase, the rain beginning to fall. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. "Tiffany?" Her mother sounded broken. "The bank. They saw the news. They're calling in the loan on the house because of the character clause or something. And Dad got fired from the factory. His boss said he didn't want the father of someone like you working there." "Mum, don't come home, Tiffany," her mother said, her voice cracking. "Don't come back to Ohio. You've brought enough shame on this family." The line went dead. Tiffany sat in the rain, the water soaking through her clothes. She had lost her job. She had lost her boyfriend. She had lost her family's support. She was facing years in a British prison. She was the most hated woman in the Western Hemisphere. And the worst part? She knew, deep down in the dark pit of her stomach, that she deserved it. In the Apex Aviation boardroom, Naomi watched the news report on the mute TV screen. It showed Tiffany running from the grocery store. "Is it enough?" David Sterling asked quietly. Naomi looked at the screen. She didn't feel joy. She felt a grim sense of balance. "It's not about revenge, David," Naomi said, turning off the TV. "It's about the standard. She broke the social contract. She thought she was untouchable because she was pretty and wore a uniform. She thought I was nothing. Now she knows what it feels like to be nothing." "The trial is set for next month," David said. "The lawyers say she'll likely get 3 years. She'll be deported back to the US after serving the time, with a permanent criminal record. She'll never work in aviation, hospitality, or any client-facing role again." "Good," Naomi said. She stood up and picked up her bag, a new, high-end leather briefcase, though she still wore her comfortable sneakers. "Let's get back to work. We have an airline to run. And David?" "Yes, Naomi. Make sure the next crew on the Global 7500 knows I take my water with ice." David smiled. "I'll brief them personally." Naomi walked out of the office, head held high. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a monument of justice. But the story wasn't quite over. Karma had one last, ironic twist left for Tiffany St. Clair. 4 years had passed since the Billionaire slap made global headlines. The memes had faded. But for Tiffany St. Clair, the nightmare never ended. She was no longer the queen of the sky. She was a convicted felon with a record for assault and perverting the course of justice. After serving 18 months in a British prison and declaring bankruptcy, she had fled to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Blacklisted from every airline and luxury hotel, she had landed the only job she could get, a waitress at Sal's roadside diner. Her uniform was a polyester orange dress that smelled of stale grease. Her feet ached as she navigated the sticky linoleum, a far cry from the plush carpets of the Global 7500. "Table 4 needs coffee, Tiff," Sal, the owner, yelled from the kitchen. "Move it!" Tiffany grabbed the pot, her head down. The diner door jingled, and a group of women walked in. They were laughing, dragging roller bags, dressed in crisp navy uniforms with gold wings. They were flight attendants from Apex Aviation. Tiffany froze behind the counter. She recognized the woman leading them. It was Brittany, the timid junior stewardess Tiffany used to bully. Brittany now wore the silk scarf of a land attendant. She looked confident, happy, and successful. Tiffany tried to hide, but Sal shouted again, "Customers, go!" She approached the booth with trembling hands. Brittany looked up to order, and her smile vanished. She stared at the haggard, orange-clad waitress with a look of pity that hurt worse than anger. "Tiffany?" Brittany whispered. The new hires at the table gasped, realizing they were looking at the infamous woman from the training videos, the cautionary tale. Before Tiffany could speak, the door opened again. Naomi Price walked in. She looked regal in a sharp business suit. "Sorry I'm late, ladies," Naomi said, sliding into the booth next to Brittany. "Breakfast is on me." Then she saw the waitress. Tiffany stopped breathing. She waited for Naomi to scream, to mock her, to get her fired. Instead, Naomi looked her in the eye with devastating calm. "Good morning. I'll have the oatmeal and hot tea, please." Tiffany stared at her. "You aren't going to say anything?" "I'm hungry, and you're working," Naomi replied smoothly. "I wouldn't want to disrupt your job. I know how important it is to keep a schedule." The shade was subtle, but crushing. Tiffany served them in silence, invisible to their laughter, a ghost in her own life. When they finished, Naomi placed a $100 bill on the table for a $20 check. "Keep the change," Naomi said. "I don't want your charity." Tiffany spat, a last flicker of her old arrogance surfacing. Naomi stopped and turned back. "It's not charity, Tiffany. It's a tip. It's what you give service workers when you respect the work they do. Maybe if you had learned that 4 years ago, you'd be sitting here instead of standing there." Naomi walked out. Brittany and the crew followed. Tiffany stood alone, clutching the bill, more money than she had made in 3 days. Outside, the roar of a jet engine tore through the air. Through the window, she saw the midnight blue Global 7500 climbing steeply into the clouds, heading for destinations she would never see again. "Table 6, stop slacking," Sal yelled. "I'm docking your pay." Tiffany wiped a single tear from her cheek, turned back to the dirty dishes and whispered, "Coming, Sal." What an incredible journey of justice and karma. We started high in the sky with Tiffany, a woman who thought her uniform gave her the right to judge others, and we ended with her grounded in reality, learning the hardest lesson of all. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how high you fly, you should never look down on people, because you never know who they really are. Naomi showed us that true power isn't about bullying, it's about integrity. Tiffany thought she was the queen, but she ended up serving the very people she despised. It's the ultimate be careful who you step on story. If you enjoyed this dramatic story of instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What did you think of Naomi's final words in the diner? Was she too nice, or was that the perfect revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.